Welcome to another episode of Mastered Behind the Music Business. My name's Jenna, and today I sat down with Patrick Guay, who works at Evenko. If you're not familiar with the company, they are the major promoters for festivals like Osheaga and LASSO. He's on the booking and promoting team. So he is your guy when it comes to understanding how to prepare yourself to be booked for major festivals, the realities of being booked. It's really hard. We talked about it in terms of selling tickets. Really, your readiness for a festival of that size is based on your ability to sell tickets in your own region and adjacent regions, along with the area in which that festival actually is happening. Patrick has a really interesting background for how he kind of got to this position today, from being in a band to working in the label space to the booking space. So hopefully there's something for you to learn in this episode. Thanks for checking out another episode of Mastered. Here's my chat with Patrick. Welcome to the Mastered podcast, Patrick. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. You are one of those people behind the scenes of some massive festivals and getting really cool headliners and openers and all of those slots booked for LASSO, Osheaga. Am I missing anything else?
Well, we do we're actually one of the only companies that is a festival booker, but also we do about 1,600 shows year round. We have a big team. We do like all the arena and club business, like 90% of it in Montreal and Quebec and Atlantic Canada as well. So yeah, no, we've got
Wow.
a lot of stuff going on all the time for
No
sure.
kidding. Where are you based out of? Are you in Montreal then?
I'm in Montreal, yeah.
Okay. Do you speak French or no?
It's not as good as it should be, but let's just leave it at that.
Enough
But
said.
I grew up in Toronto, and like the formative years when you really need to like learn the language is like grades 1 to 5 or whatever, and we just didn't have that. So
Yeah.
um, I've been doing my best ever since we moved back here when I was 17. So
Wow. That's great. And I mean, I was at LASSO a couple weeks ago. Lots of Anglo. Nobody's yelling at you when you can't speak French.
it's a great environment there. I mean, like you just get people from all walks of life. Like that's the only festival that we do that's kind of like 15 to 75. Yeah, it runs the gamut, and it's a lot of fun because there's no. I mean, you got some bros and you got people having maybe too much of a good time, but like there's never any issues or never any real kind of like it's just people maybe having 4 or 7 too many beers, and like what's the issue with that? That happens every day at country festivals.
Sorry, you don't see 75-year-olds at Bill Sonique. Why don't we jump into a little bit about your career? How did you kind of get into this? Was this something you were always interested in? Did you go to school for it?
So I basically, when I was 17, when I first moved to Montreal, started a band, and then we ended up having some local success, and then we ended up like touring Canada a few times. And I was the one kind of like doing all like the calling, like back then, like way pre-internet and email, and you know, I don't even think pigeons existed back then, but there was like you would have to call the clubs and you would like beg them to book your band, say, hey, we're coming through cross Canada tour. Can you put us on for like, it was like $50 and maybe a case of beer kind of thing. So you're just basically trying to cover your gas from town to town. But I was the one making a lot of those calls. So definitely that's kind of like what sparked that side of it for me. I kind of also was doing a lot of like the graphics. So I do I would do at school. I would use the photocopier and just like kind of cut and paste and make all the show flyers and stuff like that. So um, those two things ended up being like the two things that I ended up doing for basically my whole life. Um, we did that tour, and I quit the band when I was probably around like 19. But then just kind of continued working at local promoters and record labels, and then ultimately worked for a couple larger record labels. And then it just ended up being one of those things where like I got sucked into being a promoter, by a friend of mine, and I didn't think it was for me, like, really, but, and then it just ended up working out, and then, I've been at Evenko for 9 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you dip your feet in when you were on the label side?
So I worked for a label called Arts and Crafts out of Toronto, in, from, like, 2004 to 2010 kind of thing. I'm just kinda basically doing everything, management and graphics, like, doing some social media stuff when that was in its early phases. It was, a small team, so you were just kinda, like, covering every base you could.
And then, was that all you were based in Toronto still, or did you do that from Quebec?
No, I've always been in Montreal, like, my kind of whole professional career. I did spend a lot of time in Toronto. I'd spend, like, a week a month in Toronto when I was at Arts and Crafts, but then my wife didn't like that, and I wasn't really, it just wasn't one of those things where it was a natural kind of fit, so
Yeah, that makes
it
sense.
was, yeah.
Okay, so what are your kinda if somebody's looking to get into the booking and side of the business, what do you recommend? I know you maybe didn't have, like, a lateral path yourself, but how do you find other people maybe? How have you seen them navigate getting into the promoter side?
It kind of feels like everyone has a very similar path where you start, you start going to shows, then you start meeting the other people that are shows, and maybe they have friends that are like working production at the shows, working, various aspects, ticketing maybe or something like that. And then it's basically like maybe you start volunteering, being like, well, back then it was like handing out flyers, but, maybe there's a version of that now, or like, just kind of like getting involved in any way possible and proving that you're like kind of like eager, but not too eager. It's kind of like there's always going to be a need for like nice, hardworking people, and not just music, but in any industry. So I like it. Like I think that if you could try to find some local people that are like doing it and kind of learn from them, that's a good way to start. But easier said than done. But most people have started that way.
Yeah, for sure. I found talking to a number of folks across recording these episodes that some of them are like, "Well, I started here. This is where I've ended up. This isn't what I pictured myself doing by any means, or this wasn't if you look back, this isn't maybe exactly what I thought I was gonna be doing now versus then."
But yeah, the path sometimes is crazy. I've heard of people that were like full on lawyers making like, 200 grand a year, and then they just got fed up with it and decided to like represent their friend's band, doing a lawyer, and then
Yep.
and then they ended up being the manager, and so that was their segue into management or something. I've kind of heard it all in
Yeah,
my years around.
which is kind of nice. I think, I grew up in the era of you need to go to school and get this degree and you'll get this kind of job, and then we did that and you're like, you get the degree and you're like, "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed how am I supposed to work?" And then that just reminds us all of, like, doing the thing and being boots on the ground wherever that might be is always going to be so valuable in finding your way, what you actually wanna do.
Like, even if you do the school bit, it's like, just doing that as well, is just, like, it proves its worth, and
Yeah,
you'll see that, like, as you kinda, like, graduate through the industry and whatnot, you'll see it's like people respect that, if you're,
yeah,
like, came from, literally the ground picking it like, I remember at Warped Tour '95, in Montreal, it's like the day after a bunch of us, including my now boss, Nick Farkas, we all went the next day to pick up the garbage because the site wasn't happy with the garbage pickup. So there was 20 of us, like all friends basically living together. They're promoting the show that we're like picking up the garbage after the Warp Tour.
those are the most glamorous moments of
Absolutely.
big time music industry jobs, don't you think? When you get to sit in a chair at work and have a chill day, you are always reminded of those days where you were just grinding.
Exactly.
Um, okay. It's an interesting time. We were just before we started recording, you were saying it's a busy time for your team right now too, because you're getting those pitches and being, asked like, I want to get on this on your roster for the for the festivals next year. So I think it's a great time to be talking about this stuff because it's back fresh in your mind how busy this season gets for you.
Hmm.
So as a dude who's getting probably a billion emails about folks wanting to play and get booked, I think this is a great time to jump in and tell me a little bit about who's ready for the festival stage. Who do you think, when you look at your very large production festivals you put on, what kind of artists are ready for that, and what are you looking for?
Like, are you talking about like development acts or
Hmm.
headliners or
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think the headliners are listening to me and anybody I have to
right?
talk with, unfortunately.
You don't think Jelly Roll's tuning in right now?
If you, hey Jelly.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it actually gets asked quite often because there's no kind of clear answer to that. Like people think that they need to get onto festivals in order to grow to help them sell tickets. Whereas a lot of promoters are looking for acts that are already worth X amount of tickets to deserve that kind of slot on the festival. I mean, obviously every festival is different and like, obviously Osheaga is a lot different than something like Hillside, where like Hillside like has maybe 20 slots for local and development acts and maybe they play for, $250. I don't know what they do, but with Osheaga and Lasso, it's kind of like there's a certain kind of level that like even the bands that are playing at 2 p.m. are most of the time worth 1,000 tickets in Montreal kind of thing. So that's one of the big kind of things that I think that people don't realize with our festivals. Obviously, other festivals are different. With Lasso, we're lucky enough to have the top of the country, the Sirius XM thing there. So that's really nice to have those three slots to be able to like, you know, showcase up and coming talent. I mean, obviously they've gotten that far by winning the contest, but they're not worth any tickets in Montreal. So maybe in their hometown or whatever, but certainly not in Montreal most of the time. So um, that's kind of like, like I would tell any band is just, keep playing and playing. You can't like until you're selling out, the local 500 cap, like 750 cap clubs in your hometown, just keep playing and like then do that in another town. Like what we used to do is we'd find bands, we'd like write letters to bands in other towns and be like, "Hey, here's our tape. Hope you like it. We'd love to do a show with you." And then you do trade-off shows. So like, X band from Kingston or Ottawa would come to Montreal and they'd open for us, and then we'd go to their town and open for them. Um, Now it's just as easy as sending them a DM or whatever. So I don't recommend writing the letter. That's like there's different ways to grow your band, and definitely like playing live as much as possible, making sure that you're the best live product possible is also a big thing because if people like your songs and they come see you live, most of the and you're not delivering, then most of the people will probably be turned off by that right away.
And you're also doing yourself a disservice at that point too. If you're not,
100%.
if your live show isn't there, then you just, the people, your productions sound great. People who are listening, they're going to see you live and be like, "Oh, that's
Mhm.
that's not what I signed up for," you know?
Yeah.
You,
Uh,
you just so yeah, when you're talking about like basically your point here is like you have to be playing. You have to play. You have to be playing regularly. You have to be on your, whether it's your own tours or getting on tours with other people. You need to be building your fan base. Period.
yeah. And you should like obviously there's going to be a right time and place to find like a label and a manager and stuff like that, but like that shouldn't be coming in the first like, I mean it depends how good you are. I mean like obviously probably someone like Billie Eilish will tell you, yeah, I got signed when I after I wrote my first 3 songs, but most bands don't they don't get signed and they don't really need a manager for the first like year and a half unless it's someone obviously that's like a company that also has a couple other acts and they think that they can develop you. But like if you're
Yeah.
like, I wouldn't waste your time actively seeking a manager over, writing the best possible songs you can and getting as good live as you
Yeah,
possibly can.
for sure. I think people get distracted sometimes with the business of music when they are the creators and the artist because it's like, oh, these people got managers and we're like the same level. And it's just like this mishmash of stuff. People are focusing potentially on the wrong things at the wrong times, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
What does a good pitch look like when it's not coming from an agency? When it's coming from an indie who's like, hey, Patrick, it was nice to meet you at this event. I want to play your, I want you to put me on the lineup next year.
To be honest, I don't think that there is a act that's ever played Osheaga or Lasso that hasn't had an agent. Like, that's kinda like what, like, when I'm talking about the levels of stuff, and I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but definitely, like, um and these days more than ever, it's like agents love signing baby bands that have potential. So, like, most of the time if you are a buzz band or something like that, you definitely have gotten the attention of an agent. Like I've definitely had agents call me and be like, "Hey, have you heard about this act? What do you know about them? Do you know anyone else snooping around them? Whatever." So like, they love to jump on things quick. So yeah, I'd say like so those acts that are playing those like early slots, they're already at that point where maybe they have an agent, not a manager, but they've developed their thing to a certain point where it's gotten the attention of not just us. I mean, you know, like I love hearing new acts, and I listen to a lot of new music all the time. Like, and love to help acts also like develop every year at the CCMAs, always do the round table where people come to the round table and they ask you a bunch of questions about like what you're looking for. And I'm always astounded at like, it's like, oh, wow, oh, you have no idea how this works. Or I don't know, you were told something and that's not the right thing at all completely. I love like paying it forward
Yeah.
and all that stuff and helping people out when I can.
This might actually be kind of a reality check too for some folks who are like, I'm so close, or Lasso is a top festival that lots of indies want to play at. And so I
Hmm.
think this is that reality check of like, have you checked those boxes? Are you doing these things? We actually pretty much strictly book through agents. So do you have an agent that reps you? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, there could be a day where, like, there is an act that, like I mean, because 'cause you're seeing, the old paradigm of, like, the music industry kinda gets broken down a little more and more every year, like, there'll be, like, acts, that are, you know, selling 1,000 tickets that don't have managers, and they're just self-managed, and, like, I remember my friend Chris was managing his band Mets for the first 10 years of their career, and at that point, they were selling, you know, 2,000 tickets in Toronto or whatever, so, like, there are like different ways to go about it for sure. And yeah, I mean, sure, there's going to be a year that we do book an act that doesn't have an agent, but they're probably already like the same thing worth like 1,000 tickets, or they've worked their way a different way. But so it's not like to say I don't want to say you need an agent to play, but like I'm just saying it, historically we have not had that. So, but that
Oh,
can change.
and those things line up too. You're saying like if a band is selling 1,000 tickets or 2,000 tickets, you're not looking at me like, oh, you don't have an agent though, so no thanks.
E-
It's like, do
Exactly.
things make sense? Like, does the story you have make sense for the festivals we are putting you on? Do you think you can tell us a little bit about the reality of booking? Because I know festivals get so much flack for, "Oh, you all have the same headliners." It's such a Canada thing where it's like, "These headliners are playing 3 or 4 of these festivals. Where are these people?" It's not like your major headliners are being handpicked easily like that, right?
Sure. I mean, like we every year it's always like our social team always puts out like who do you want to see next year, and it just basically like pointing a gun at your own face because you're you know what you're going to get, right? You're going to get, you know, 1,000 Morgan Wallens, 1,000 Luke Combs, 1,000 Luke Bryans, and the reality is um a lot of these acts, especially the ones that are playing stadiums, are making probably triple of what we could pay them to headline our festival. You know, like, we just don't have infinite money, and, you know, like, uh, when they're headlining their own show and they're walking out with, like, 8 or $9 million, it's like, "Well, why am I gonna play your festival for half that or less than half of that, unless I want to do some cool thing with my friends and maybe get them on as well. But then he could just do that and have his own tour with his friends or whatnot. So that's common misconception number one. Um, when it comes to, and like country especially is one of those things where it's like you've got your A list headliners, and then your B list is about this long, and then the C list is this, and then there's a bunch of people just kind of like floating in that worth like 2 to 4,000 ticket range that are kind of headliners, but if you stack the bill properly, it would look good, but, like, also not like a major kinda ticket draw. So, when you have something like, yeah, probably everyone was talking about Bailey Zimmerman this year. Honestly, it was a combination of them being really aggressive and wanting to go out and kind of prove to the world that, um, he was a headliner, and I totally think they did that, but also availability. A lot of times, let's say I remember checking on someone in May 2025 for August 2026, and they were like, "Oh, we're already booked." That whole, we're already booked the entire next summer, and it's like,
Okay.
15 months in advance. So
Yeah.
you're going to run into that as well. So you definitely, like you said, you're not handpicked. You're not like, okay, here's my dream lineup, I'm gonna go out and get this. Like that never happens. Like version A and C, D, and E of what you end up like, kind of, it's never, what you think it's gonna be when you first set out to do it, to put the lineup together. Um, but yeah, you kind of hope for, coax someone to come up to, Montreal especially is not historically like a country market. So a lot of times when people are coming to Montreal, it's their first time coming here and they have no idea what to expect because we don't have any country radio. And in fact, I think the first country show that was not Garth or Shania to sell out the Bell Center was Luke Bryan in 2017. So,
Crazy.
it's very, very new here. So, like, I think that because our festival is put together in such a way that it's different, because we do it on the back of Osheaga, so, like, all this production that we have there for the 3 weekends, a lot of the country acts are coming in and seeing this, kinda like Coachella-esque kinda setup and being like, "Holy crap, we're not used to playing stages this big," or I mean, not every,
Very.
obviously the headliners are, but some of the acts that
Yeah.
play at like, 3, 4 PM are just like, "Wow, this is insane. I've never played a stage this big." And then our catering and our artist compound and stuff like that is world class as well. So people walk in there and just have no idea, it's like, what's going on, really. I remember year one, Luke Bryan's tour manager came up to us and was like, "You guys got Luke off the bus. He never gets off the bus." So, he came over and, we have a 6 or 7 different, like some of Montreal's best restaurants back there serving up food, and the vibe's amazing and music's going and beers are flowing, and it's not like a lot of other festivals. So I think that kind of plays in our favor too, and that's helping get word spread about. So when we used to have to beg up until even this year, like, "Please come play our festival." Now people are like, "Hey, so and so wants to play your festival." So it's starting to turn very slowly, but it's happening.
I think, Lasso has maybe helped prove that Montreal does have a country market for sure because as a first timer at Lasso this year, I, one, couldn't believe it because it's also not easy to, in theory, it's easy to get to, but it is on an island. It's not in the middle of a field. You don't have a bunch of, like, people in some rural area of Canada pitching tents, and it's super cheap to do it. Like, it's a full, no matter what you've committed to from a ticket perspective, like, when you commit to going to Lasso, you commit to being in Montreal, super touristy. If you don't wanna be commuting and you wanna have easy access to the subway over, you gotta stay in certain areas, right? So, it's like an end-to-end experience, which is really cool.
Yeah. I like a lot of, I mean, there are a bunch, obviously, but a lot of the festivals are camping festivals, and that crowd is totally loves doing that, and that's amazing. But the reality with our site is that it's just, it's one subway stop away from downtown, and I think that there's a certain country fan that kind of like maybe is now in their late 30s or 40s that doesn't maybe like camping anymore, that wants maybe a nice hotel in old
And
Montreal and,
shower every night. Yeah.
showering and stuff like that. So I think that, we're starting to appeal to like that crowd across Canada and a bit of upstate New York. So I see that growing over the next couple of years. But I mean, we do love that we get 80% of our people from Quebec right now, which is the Osheagas at around 60% from Ontario. So it's a big
Wow,
difference. Yeah, yeah.
interesting. What's the differences for you looking at a weekend of Osheaga, other than the obvious differences, and a weekend at Lass?
Well, the site is half the size for Lasso, right? We don't there's a whole other side that we don't
Oh,
we don't use, and we're like 3 stages as opposed to 6. Um, we're what, 30, 35 bands as opposed to 90. It's just all in all, it's a more, I wouldn't say relaxed, it's still a lot of work and it's still a lot of, like, you're still in the situation room and there's always things you have to deal with, but it just Oceania is a lot broader. It's a lot like a lot more going on. Also, a lot more hands involved, so that helps. But yeah, like Lasso, maybe one day we'll get there. Maybe we'll
yeah,
open up the other side, but now it's like we'll hopefully go to 3 days before we do that.
yeah,
That, so we'll see. Going to year 5 next year, hoping for the best.
yeah. And I think next year, have you moved it to Saturday, Sunday as opposed to Friday, Saturday? What's that
Yeah,
play?
we kind of polled a bunch of people. Like it was one of those things where, in order to get people to come from out of town, we thought maybe that would be more of a benefactor of being on the Saturday Sunday. And Ilsonic moved to the Saturday Sunday a couple years ago, and we saw instant dividends on that. And then
Oh,
we polling like a portion of the fans, like, what would you rather have? It was pretty overwhelmingly Saturday Sunday. So we're like, okay, you know what? Let's give it a shot this year while we have a blank slate, and
yep.
we'll see.
Yeah, and you're also just testing the Sunday market because you know people will show up on the Friday still, and
Yeah.
so it's
Like we'll
great.
we'll we'll do like another pre-party on the Friday. Maybe we'll make it a little bigger next year or something like that. So there'll be something to do on the Friday for sure, but like having the actual days, and also people showing up, post 5, 6 o'clock after work kind of thing on the Friday. It's always better to get people on site early and get them get those Coors Lights in their hands and stuff like that. So I mean, we'll see. We'll talk a year from now, and I'll tell you how it went.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Can you think of some sort of going back to performers who basically just wanna get booked here, what are some good shows to be playing and prepping to be playing on big stages? Because you can't play the Lasso stage, that Bell stage is massive, and that Prairie stage is massive. Like, being an act that's on festival stages generally might not be the thing that prepares you for a stage that big, because it's a very easily the view is great, there's a hill, like, everybody can see you. How are you taking up space on that stage, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, like we touched on, you definitely have to be at a certain level and have played, you know, like the C level stages and the D level stages before you kind of work your way to the A and B stage. You've probably, played over 1,000 shows in your life before, when you've gotten to that point. But it's just, also certain people are just not shy. Like I remember, like the difference, like Sasha played year 1 for us on the same stage that she played in year 4. I was watching, I was just like, there was such a noticeable difference in her, performance, her band, how they played, how like, you got to be constantly learning and constantly like growing into that, like maybe when you're playing, the Lee's Palace or whatever, maybe you're closing your eyes and you're pitching yourself on that boot stage or that lasso stage or whatever.
That's fair. Just thinking about Sasha, and she has been like, the difference in her in year 1 and 4 is also a lot of live shows that she's played and
Absolutely.
her band being really tuned in. Are there other artists you can think of that might be that I hate to say North Star because it's such a buzzword term in the industry, but some of those artists that are that, like, great example of, like, you see where they started and what they worked on and why it makes sense, like Sasha for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's been I've only been in, like, country for, like, this is, like, year 4 or 5 for me. Like, before this, I knew what my father-in-law, he played Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash at home. But yeah, it wasn't like, anything that I mean, Montreal wasn't, like, into country, but neither were we really, so
Yeah,
we kinda had to learn a lot. So, over the years, I've been going to, like, RS in Nashville, like, a bunch of times, and CMA Fest. And you get to see, and also we're promoting these shows here too, right? So you get to see a James Barker band. They were already around for a while, but I've noticed a difference in them, the couple times I've seen them. Like, they played year 1 as well, Lasso, and then I saw them at CMA this year, and they've come a long way. Like, Cam Whitcomb in 6 months has gone
crazy.
from, like, kinda shy to absolutely bombastic on stage. Certain people just really grow into it really fast, and certain people just, kinda, take their time. But yeah, there's a bunch of examples of that. Even like Jelly Roll, like, I the first time I saw him playing the CRS, the New Faces show, he did like a half-hour set or whatever, and it was entertaining. Like, I don't know if it was good, but then between that and when we had him at the arena here in March, and then obviously again at Lasso, and it's like, that show is coming, and, the guy's like 39 years old. You always say, like, my mantra is always, the minute you stop learning is the minute you start dying. So, like, if you constantly have to be, like, finding ways to make yourself better no matter what age you are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I think there's a few artists who were there this year that shared the same stage that Sheryl Crow played on that night, and it was like, whoa moments for them. It was very interesting talking to them either before their sets or after and being like, I'm like on the same stage as somebody like Sheryl Crow. That is insane.
Yeah. No, it's fun, and it's fun to have that and provide, be able to, like, have those moments where, it's like, "Oh, this is an absolute legend that I'm playing," like, 4 hours before or 2 hours before or whatever. Like, those are, like, but I always say to bands, I'm like, "Watch those bands," like,
Yeah,
not just her, but, like, the drummer, and, like, because these guys have probably been on the road for 30 years, like, you can soak up so much just from watching and being around people like that.
yeah, soak up so much sun, if you will.
Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum.
Bad. That was bad. That was bad. That was bad. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that, uh, like the indie crowd is always asking about, or like, is there anything else off that you're thinking that like people ask and here's this is really important kind of shit that they need to know?
I just like, anyone I tell them, it's just like, "Hey, if you think you've written your best song, then go out and write a better one." Just constantly, people are just, like, always looking for those songs. You just gotta keep writing, keep writing,
Yeah,
keep writing, keep writing, and eventually, there'll be that song. You could even, sell it to a friend, or, like, like, if it doesn't work out for you where you're a musician or a band yourself, like, that's something that people, they call them, like, failed musicians, but they're really not, because they're actually writing songs for other people and probably making just as much money as they are. I tell people that, like, quite often. It's like, just keep writing, keep writing,
yeah.
keep writing.
A good example of that is the song Good Directions by Billy Corrington. Luke
I
Bryan wrote
know.
that,
Yeah,
and Luke Bryan wasn't big enough to put it out knowing it was a hit when he wrote that. And so he gave
right.
it to his buddy Billy Currington, who was huge at that point, and that's just so funny looking at that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, for
'Cause
sure.
that might not have been the song at the time that it was.
100%.
Yeah, you have to know when you have a great song and somebody else might be able to take it somewhere better or bigger, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
All that to say, huge learning here is sometimes when we think of festivals and getting booked, they talk about it in dollars, and your major theme here is you talk about it in tickets. So that's a huge thing I've learned personally. I don't know if um, a lot of artists are thinking about it in that sense. Like, how much am I selling at a show in my hometown right now? How much, the next time I come around, is it going to be 500 versus the 200 that I sold? That kind of stuff. So I think that's super valuable for artists who are measuring, like, am I ready for that stage? Am I ready for events this big? What I think the last thing that comes to mind for me is collaborating, or I don't know if collaborating is the right word, but other major festivals in the country. And I don't know if Lasso has necessarily direct competition given its location, it being the only like festival. Is that the only country festival of its size in Quebec?
I mean, there's a bunch that are maybe a bit smaller than us, but like there's like Laviniere, and there's like Festival Saint Tit, and then one or two others. But everyone's different in a way. You know what I mean? It'll be like more of like a kind of like two baseball diamond back to back, like 15, 20,000 person
Yeah,
thing. Or like Saint Tit is like a whole town that they turn into like a fair. Like they have like a market and stuff like that, but they also have, they'll have who was it they had, like Sam Hunt, or anyway, something like that. They'll have one or two like big headliners, whatever. So it's a bit different. I think that we're um one of the only kind of like, I guess, what's a good way to put it? I don't know. We're definitely like probably on the top end of that in Canada, but
yeah.
we're still growing, and we still have a lot of we're haven't by no means made it. So we're definitely always constantly trying to improve. And there's a lot of great festivals, like the from the Country Thunders to the Boots, and it's great to be part of that community for sure.
Is it a community? Like, are you sharing the learnings with each other and kind
Yeah,
of
I
like
mean,
when things come up? Yeah,
like we're
sure.
definitely friendly enough with,
Yeah,
like Cavendish and YQM and Boots. Like, we talk to them quite often. Maybe not so much about talent. I think everyone's kind of like uh wants to do their own thing, and just kind of like, maybe we'll talk to each other like a couple weeks before the lineups, when once everything is in place, kind of thing. Or
yeah,
if we know that X other festival that's like, has the same headliner, we'll just be like, "Hey, by the way, we're doing the same thing." You know, I mean, they can't really say no. We're just like, "No," but it's like, we'll just warn you, kind of thing. Like, yeah,
yeah.
like it's a courtesy thing. And I think we like to we'd rather all be friends than have rather have friends than enemies, that's for
That is such a, I was like, this is a good way to end this, but you said friend, rather have friends than enemies. That is very blanket over.
sure.
It's not just the music industry. Like, lots of industries are so competitive and cutthroat, and I think what we see time and time again is when you're not, one, friendly and cool with people, you're the one who it doesn't work out for. But two, like, look at this massive community we can grow if everybody's kind of working on it together.
100%. It's a small, like Canada is a very small town when it comes to the music industry. So
Can indies reach out to you for questions, whatnot? You're allowed to say no. Uh, Asking if, like, do you have any recommendations for where I should be, what I should be doing right now versus when I'm ready for a big stage like Lasso? Can they come to you for this kind of stuff, or see you at CCMAs at the
yeah,
round tables to
absolutely,
show
for
up?
sure.
Yeah,
No, no, no. I mean, like either or, you can come to that, or like, yeah, I'm totally fine with, helping
yeah,
in any way I can. I was
awesome.
there too once, so
Yeah, it's nice you actually have the background of being in a band and understanding the grind and the hustle, but also the like,
eating cold Chef
I'm
Boyardee out of a can in the back of a van with four other stinky guys. Like, yeah, I've been there.
yeah, exactly. You've got those humble beginnings. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. This has been super great. I hope if anybody has questions, you can reach out to Patrick. If you're pitching to him, you better make it good and you better have lots of tickets sold in your hometown and every town adjacent, because you got to be working on that if you want to play live. This is Mastered by Front Porch Music. Join Logan Miller and Jenna Weiser, the hosts of CCMA-nominated On the Porch with Front Porch Music, for this mini-series podcast offering crash courses on the ins and outs of the music industry. Expert guests from across the Canadian music landscape sit down with Jenna and Logan to discuss labels, getting your shows booked, landing festival slots, A&R, social media, and so much more. Mastered by Front Porch Music is produced by Logan Miller, Jenna Weiser, and Jason Saunders. The theme song for this podcast was written, produced, and performed by Keith Hunt.